Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. In India, the Modi government remains firm on contentious new agricultural laws despite an impasse with protesting farmers. Farmers have blocked highways and certain state borders as they prepare for a longer sit-in at Delhi border. More than 300 boys kidnapped from a boarding school in northwestern Nigeria have been released. In an interview, State Governor Aminu Bello Masari says the students are on their way back to Katsina, but he said some schoolboys remain with the captors. The U.S. has surpassed 17 million cases of the new coronavirus with more than 310,000 deaths. Brazil recorded over 1,000 new COVID-19 deaths for the first time in more than 3 months, with the tally crossing 184,000. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the virus has claimed 83 lives and infected nearly 3,000 people in the past 24 hours. The nationwide death toll has risen to 9,164. Globally, there are 1.6 million fatalities and 74 million infections. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has invited the Taliban to Kandahar to hold discussions about bringing peace to Afghanistan. Speaking in Kandahar, Ghani said no more Taliban prisoners will be released as the group has not reduced violence. However, the Taliban insist that the Afghan security forces are carrying out attacks on civilians. They have already declined to hold talks in Afghanistan. In cricket, Pakistan are batting against New Zealand in the first T20 of the 3-match series in Auckland. Earlier, the Green Caps won the toss and elected to bat first. Both sides are playing without some of their key players. Well, those are the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. The U.S. has surpassed 17 million cases of the new coronavirus with more than 310,000 deaths. Brazil recorded over 1,000 new COVID-19 deaths for the first time in more than 3 months, with the tally crossing 184,000. Globally, there are 1.6 million fatalities and 74 million infections. More in the following report.
A frightening surge in coronavirus cases and vaccine optimism are trading hand in hand at this stage of the pandemic, with COVID-19 hospitalizations at a record high for the 12th straight day in the U.S. The Food and Drug Authority advisors have endorsed emergency use of Moderna's vaccine. Meanwhile, California has reported record high daily deaths, while San Francisco has imposed a 10-day quarantine on the incoming travelers. Down south, Colombia's daily cases have reached their highest level since August as the government warned people against large holiday gatherings. Chile says the first doses of the Pfizer vaccine will arrive this month, allowing it to begin vaccination before the year ends.
Hasta ahora tenemos.
So far, we are in very advanced stages and we have agreements that guarantee 10 million doses with the Pfizer-BioNTech laboratory and 10 million doses with the Sinovac laboratory. If we add to this the agreement we have with laboratories such as AstraZeneca, Oxford, Janssen, Johnson & Johnson, and the alliance with COVAX, they allow us to reach more than 30 million doses of vaccines. These contracts will allow us to distribute 20 million doses of vaccine during the first half of the next year.
In Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron's positive test has sent ripples through the European political sphere, with multiple leaders forced to quarantine. Northern Ireland is preparing for a sweeping lockdown and deployment of paramedics from the Republic of Ireland. Meanwhile, a new mystery cluster of COVID-19 cases in Australia's New South Wales continue to grow. Many states and territories are imposing border restrictions and other curbs amid fears of a surge.
So everybody in Greater Sydney needs to be on high alert. If you have the mildest of symptoms, please get tested and isolate. But also, can everybody please think about their activity? Nobody should be getting on public transport without wearing a mask. Nobody in Greater Sydney should be going to a supermarket, a place of worship or other high-risk areas without wearing a mask.
In Asia, South Korea continues to grapple with the latest outbreak as it reported over 1,000 cases overnight yet again. China is planning to vaccinate 50 million people before the start of the peak Lunar New Year travel season, and Pfizer has filed a request for approval of its vaccine in Japan.
And for more on coronavirus, in Pakistan, 83 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This takes the country's death toll to over 9,164. The ministry said over 3,000 new infections were detected overnight, which takes the active cases to more than 42,000 in the country. The health ministry says out of over 451,000 countrywide cases, more than 399,000 people have recovered. The ministry said over 201,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province. Punjab has reported nearly 130,000 cases. In the capital city of Islamabad, nearly 35,000 have been infected so far. And moving on, more than 300 boys kidnapped from a boarding school in northwestern Nigeria have been released. In an interview, State Governor Aminu Bello Masari says the students are on their way back to Katsina. Masari said all the freed students were found unharmed and are in a good state. He said most of the kidnapped students have been rescued, if not all of them. He did not say how many had been missing or how they were freed. Masari also made assurances on the increased security of all schools in the state before they reopen. The attack on the school on December 11th has been claimed by Boko Haram militants. And Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has invited the Taliban to Kandahar to hold discussions about bringing peace to Afghanistan. Speaking in Kandahar, Ghani said no more Taliban prisoners will be released as the group has not reduced violence. However, the Taliban insist that the Afghan security forces are carrying out attacks on civilians. They have already declined to hold talks in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the U.S. military said its top general met Taliban representatives this week in Qatar. The U.S. chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, urged the group to move more swiftly towards a political solution. This comes a day after Milley met Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and discussed the security tensions and the ongoing peace process. And in India, the Modi government remains firm on new agricultural laws despite an impasse with protesting farmers. Farmers have blocked highways and certain state borders as they prepare for a longer sit-in at the Delhi border.
The Shutdown India movement against agricultural reforms by Indian farmers has entered its 23rd day. Farm leaders have called for a boycott of products by corporations they say lobbied for the legislation. These corporations include the Ambani and Adani business groups. Meanwhile, the government in Uttar Pradesh state has issued notices to 6 farmer leaders asking them to submit bonds of 50,000 rupees. The farmers have dubbed it as harassment and have denied giving into such tactics. Refusing to repeal the laws, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government has dubbed tens of thousands of farmers unpatriotic. Yesterday, the Indian Supreme Court defended the right to non-violent protests of farmers. It suggested the government should not implement farm laws till the court makes a final decision.
The International Atomic Energy Agency says reviving the Iran nuclear deal will require striking a new agreement. The nuclear watchdog's chief, Rafael Grossi, says the new deal must set out how Tehran's breaches should be reversed. He said there had been too many violations for the agreement to snap back into place. Grossi also called for a protocol which will stipulate clearly what should be done by the IAEA. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has said Washington will rejoin the deal if Iran resumes strict compliance. But Tehran says it can quickly reverse those steps if Washington first lifts the sanctions. And the UN General Assembly has unanimously approved a resolution sponsored by Pakistan. It reaffirms the right to self-determination for people subjected to colonial, foreign, and alien occupation. The resolution, called Universal Realization of the Right of Peoples to Self-Determination, was co-sponsored by 71 countries. The Assembly opposed foreign military intervention and deplored the plight of refugees and displaced persons. Pakistan's UN Ambassador Munir Akram said the move reaffirms Islamabad's legal, political, and moral case in support to Kashmiris. The Assembly also adopted a resolution on Palestinian self-determination and their right to an independent state. Moving on, in the U.S., federal authorities have expressed alarm about a long undetected intrusion into their computer systems around the globe. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency said the attack was aimed at critical infrastructure. Homeland Security has defined critical infrastructure as vital assets to its economy, power plants, and financial institutions. While warning of a grave risk to government and private networks, it suspects that Russian hackers were behind the attacks. Authorities said it was hard to detect and would be difficult to undo. The Department of Energy acknowledged they had been among those breached by unknown hackers. In India, police have arrested more than 50 people involved in an international call center scam. The group is accused of defrauding more than 4,500 people in the United States and other countries. New Delhi police says the plot fooled Americans into paying more than $14 million. The callers convinced victims to transfer money or their assets would be frozen as part of an elaborate drug probe. Investigators say the victims were given a choice to either face arrest or make an alternative settlement outside the law. India has emerged as a hotspot for online fraud, with perpetrators rarely being punished. Earlier in August, a call center bugged computers of over 30,000 Americans and charged $700 each. And Christmas has gone to the dogs in Peru. The nation's pooches put on their festive best to mark the holiday season. More in this report.
Funny hats, jingle bells, and tartan were all the rage on this runway in Lima, the capital city of Peru. But the showstoppers were a stream of pampered pooches. There was a serious message behind the costumes, with owners speaking out against the use of fireworks this Christmas.
We organized this for the Christmas season, with people coming with their dogs dressed up for Christmas. They have received a talk on responsible pet ownership, and also when it comes to dealing with these festivities. There's always fireworks, and such things have an impact.
Due to the heightened levels of hearing, many dogs suffer from anxiety from the sharp sounds of fireworks going off.
The message is just that, no to fireworks. They are very sensitive to sound, and it is them who lose out in Christmas. That is why we say no to fireworks.
The parade also awarded the best dressed pooch this holiday season.
More than 30,000 tremors have rocked Antarctica since the end of August. The University of Chile says this spike in seismic activity intrigued researchers to study the remote snowbound continent. More in this report.
Incessant tremors that continue to rock the Antarctic region have become a matter of concern for researchers. Scientists say the small quakes, including a stronger one of magnitude 6, were detected in the Bransfield Strait, a 60-mile wide ocean channel between the South Shetland Islands and the Antarctic Peninsula.
There are so many earthquakes occurring at once that we are identifying them with automatic pattern recognition systems. So we are recognizing only the biggest earthquakes, the most important ones. There may be many more. We have recorded more than 32,000 earthquakes so far between the end of August and the beginning of December.
According to the National Seismological Center, several tectonic plates and microplates meet near the strait, which leads to frequent rumbling, but the past 3 months have been unusual. The shakes have become so frequent that the strait itself is expanding much each year.
Around the end of August, with the GPS measurements that can be made on both sides, both in the South Shetland Islands and on the Antarctic Peninsula, this separation has increased to more than 15 centimeters per year. So from 8 millimeters to 15 centimeters is an increase of almost 20 times, and then indicating that there is a process that is happening right now.
The peninsula is one of the fastest warming places on Earth, and scientists are closely monitoring the changing climate's impact on its icebergs and glaciers.
Thousands of people from Africa cross the Mediterranean waters each year to find better opportunities elsewhere. But the journey is often riddled with dangers and difficulties, and for some, it ends up proving fatal. This report has the details. Over the last few years, thousands have drowned in pursuit of better life on the northern, richer coasts of the Mediterranean Sea. The risks these asylum seekers face are not restricted to just the sea, as they also brave the odds of the punishing Sahara Desert, conflicts, and war in Libya, the departure country.
They tell you to pay or they hold you from here and here. And they say you pay money or there is no voyage. Each Somali citizen has to pay $9,300.
Stranded in Libya, one such migrant from Niger, Abdul Razak, works as a cleaner in Tripoli after giving up on another sea crossing. The horrors he has faced at the hands of local militias paint a gruesome picture of what life can be like for such migrants.
They use a WhatsApp group to contact their families in Somalia and take videos of every Somali who doesn't have the money to pay. The smugglers beat you and they put a rock on your head and say in the video, transfer the money, and my mom can see and hear this. But we don't have anything there. We only had a house in the capital, so there's nowhere else I can get the money. The guys here tell me transfer the money, but I don't have any. It's just the house with 4 rooms and bathrooms and I sold it.
As dangerous and near fatal the Mediterranean waters are for the African migrants, life in Libya comes with its own set of woes. And we'll be back with more news after a short break. Stay with us. We're back with business news. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says post-Brexit trade talks are now in a serious phase. In a statement, Johnson said every effort was being made to accommodate reasonable European Union requests on the level playing field. It said the gap has narrowed some fundamental areas which remain difficult to resolve. Johnson reiterated that time is short and a no-deal scenario is very likely unless the EU changes their position substantially. Earlier, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said it will be very challenging to bridge the big differences, and particularly on the fisheries issue. She said there was substantial progress in the talks on many issues. Trade talks will resume today in Brussels with 2 weeks to go before the UK finally leaves the EU trading rules. And New Zealand's economy has bounced back strongly from recession in the third quarter of the year. The country attained what is known as V-shaped recovery from the coronavirus-induced slump. The Statistics Department said New Zealand's gross domestic product surged 14% from the second quarter. It said the economic rebound was a vindication of the country's COVID-19 elimination strategy. The government's determination to eliminate the virus saw it impose one of the strictest lockdowns in the world, but it allowed a quicker resumption of economic activity once the virus was stamped out. And the European Union has allocated over $7 billion to Turkey in support for hosting Syrian refugees. Europe witnessed the biggest refugee crisis since World War II in 2015, when 1 million people arrived there. Under a deal with the EU, Ankara pledged to accept the return of migrants arriving in Greece in exchange for over $7 billion. The bloc's envoy to Ankara called it the finalization of its agreement to support refugees in Turkey. The EU money has been earmarked for specific social projects inside Turkey for helping the refugees. Earlier this year, Turkey said it will not prevent migrants from leaving for EU territory, but later rescinded the threat. Moving on, most stocks in the Asia-Pacific have declined as investors evaluate surging COVID-19 cases and developments from the Bank of Japan. Australia's ASX 200 is leading the losses, tumbling over 1%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has also dropped nearly 1%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 and the Topix Index have declined marginally. Mainland Chinese stocks, too, have dipped, with both Shanghai Composite and the Shenzhen Component shedding fractionally. But the Kospi in South Korea bucked the trend, clawing up above the flat line fractionally. And on to sports. In cricket, Pakistan are batting against New Zealand in the first match of their T20 series in Auckland. Earlier, the Green Caps won the toss and elected to bat first. Both sides are playing without some of their key players. Pakistan are led by Shadab Khan after prolific run scorer Babar Azam was injured during practice. Meanwhile, the Black Caps captain Kane Williamson has opted out of the opener due to the birth of his child. The Court of Arbitration for Sport has cut Russia's ban from all major sporting events down to 2 years. But the ban still prevents Russia from competing in next year's Tokyo Olympics and 2022 Football World Cup. In its ruling, the court said the reduction of the ban must not be seen as any validation of Russia's conduct. The ban will now run until December 2022, meaning Russia will not compete at the Winter Olympics in Beijing. Athletes who can prove they are untainted by the doping scandal will be able to compete under a neutral flag. Russia has been banned from competing as a nation in athletics since 2015. And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.